Before we answer the question of what Ryuichi Kihara and Riku Miura ate after their massage sessions, we need to go back a little. The story actually begins a few days earlier. Last week on this channel, we talked about their morning routine. We revisited the autumn of 2019, when it was still dark outside, and Ryuichi would pull up in front of Riku's homestay every morning. We talked about that first morning when he picked up the 17-year-old skater at her front door, and how that simple routine repeated itself hundreds of times until it became the foundation of one of the greatest pair skating partnerships in history. That video sparked an incredible response. Many viewers said they were moved to tears just imagining Ryuichi driving to pick Riku up every morning. Others insisted that only people deeply in love would do something like that. But among all those comments, one question stood out. What happened after practice? Where did they go? What did they do once training was over? Today, that's exactly the story we're going to explore. We already know how their day began. Every morning, Ryuichi would pick Riku up and take her to the rink. But what happened after the final practice session? Where did they go, and how did they spend the rest of their day? For elite athletes, the work doesn't stop when they step off the ice. Training is only one part of the job. Recovery is just as important, and for Ryuichi, it wasn't optional. It was essential. Years of competing at the highest level had pushed his body to its limits. Although he was officially diagnosed with lumbar spondylosis in 2023, the wear and tear had been building long before that. Pair skating is one of the most physically demanding sports in the world. Every day, athletes lift their partners overhead with one arm, rotate at incredible speed, and absorb powerful landings on unforgiving ice. Ryuichi had lifted Riku thousands upon thousands of times. Every lift, every throw, every landing left another invisible mark on his muscles and joints. That's why post-practice recovery became part of his daily routine. It wasn't simply about easing soreness. It was how he prepared for the next day's training and protected the career he had spent years building. After practice, one destination became almost routine for him: the massage clinic. An article published by Shuken Bunshun describing the pair's life in Canada included one fascinating detail. It mentioned that whenever Ryuichi headed to his massage appointment after training, he and Riku brought matching homemade lunch boxes. That single sentence may hold the answer to today's entire story. Let's take a closer look at one important word: matching. In Japanese, the word means much more than simply owning the same item. Matching mugs, matching keychains, matching t-shirts, they aren't usually accidental. They represent a conscious decision to share something with another person. People choose matching items because they want to feel connected. Couples often buy matching souvenirs while traveling. Close friends exchange matching accessories on birthdays. The object itself isn't what's important. It's the feeling behind it, the quiet message that says, "I want us to share this." So what about Ryuichi and Riku's matching lunch boxes? Who made that decision? Did Ryuichi decide to prepare one for both of them? Did Riku suggest bringing the same lunch? Or did it simply happen naturally over time without either of them ever discussing it? We'll probably never know. But one fact remains undeniable. Someone made the choice to turn one lunch into two. Instead of preparing only for themselves, someone thought about the other person. That small decision wasn't a one-time gesture. It became a habit, and habits often reveal far more about a relationship than grand declarations ever could. Now let's focus on another important detail. They were homemade lunches. Sports nutritionist Akiko Nishiyama once shared an interview about working with Ryuichi. She explained that he recorded everything he ate over 3 consecutive days, and what stood out immediately was that he cooked nearly every meal himself. 3 homemade meals every single day. Living in Canada, far from home, Ryuichi carefully managed his own nutrition. Cooking wasn't an occasional hobby, it was part of his daily life as an elite athlete. That makes the story of those matching lunch boxes even more meaningful. Someone had to spend time in the kitchen. Maybe it happened the night before, after an exhausting day of practice. Maybe it happened early in the morning while everyone else was still asleep. Either way, preparing 2 lunch boxes instead of one required extra time, extra effort, and a deliberate decision. Think back to another story we discussed last week. Ryuichi's signature dish was curry. Riku once made omelette rice for him, and he jokingly smiled and admitted, "It's delicious." But that little story tells us something important. The kitchen wasn't centered around one person. Each of them had their own specialties. Perhaps one day's lunch was filled with Ryuichi's homemade curry. Maybe another day it was Riku's omelette rice. Or perhaps they stood side by side in the kitchen, each preparing part of the meal together. The phrase, matching homemade lunch boxes, quietly leaves room for every one of those possibilities. There's another detail we shouldn't overlook. When Riku first began pair skating, she became so focused on managing her weight that she reduced breakfast to a single slice of bread. During practice, her energy sometimes dropped so much that she struggled to stay focused. Ryuichi noticed. Instead of confronting her directly, he came up with a thoughtful solution. Whenever he consulted a nutritionist, he intentionally put the conversation on speakerphone so Riku could overhear the advice without feeling pressured. Later, Riku admitted she pretended not to be listening, but inside she was thinking, that makes sense. She would eventually say that Ryuichi cared about her physical condition almost as much as he cared about his own. When you remember that story, those matching homemade lunch boxes begin to carry a deeper meaning. Perhaps choosing homemade meals instead of eating out wasn't just about convenience. Maybe it reflected a shared commitment to nutrition, recovery, and keeping each other healthy enough to continue chasing their dreams. We can't say that with certainty, but when you look at Ryuichi's character and the countless stories told by the people around him, that interpretation feels remarkably consistent. And that brings us to the next question. It's not just that they packed matching lunches, it's the fact that after practice, they went there together. Ryuichi headed to his massage appointments. He was the one receiving treatment. His body was the one that desperately needed recovery, yet the article didn't mention a single lunch box. It mentioned 2 matching homemade lunch boxes. That small detail changes everything. If Ryuichi had gone alone, 1 lunch would have been enough. There would have been no reason to prepare matching meals. The fact that there were 2 tells us something important. Riku was there with him. Even though she wasn't the one getting a massage, she chose to go anyway. She waited while Ryuichi received treatment. Maybe she sat quietly in the waiting room. Maybe she waited on a nearby bench, or perhaps she stayed in the car until he finished. Wherever she was, one thing seems clear. They spent that time together, opening their matching lunch boxes and sharing a meal. Take a moment to think about what it really means to wait for someone. People rarely wait unless they truly want to. Time is valuable, especially for elite athletes. After hours of intense training, recovery time is precious. That's when athletes stretch, shower, eat, rest, and prepare for the next day. Choosing to spend part of that limited time waiting for someone else's appointment isn't something people do without a reason. Was Riku worried about Ryuichi's condition? Did she simply enjoy being with him? Or had waiting for each other become such a natural part of their lives that neither of them even questioned it anymore? We'll never know the exact answer. But just as Ryuichi developed the habit of picking Riku up every morning, it seems Riku developed her own routine of accompanying him after practice. From sunrise to sunset, their days were connected. Their mornings began with the drive to the rink. Their afternoons were filled with practice. Their evenings included recovery, homemade meals, and quiet moments together. Try to picture the scene. Maybe they were sitting outside the massage clinic as the Canadian evening sun began to set. Maybe they were still wearing their training clothes, exhausted after another demanding day on the ice. One by one, they opened their lunch boxes. That moment really happened. What did they talk about? Maybe they reviewed that day's practice. Maybe they discussed jump technique or choreography. Perhaps they talked about upcoming competitions or worries they hadn't shared with anyone else. Or maybe they didn't talk about skating at all. Maybe they laughed about a television show. Maybe they discussed a strange ingredient they found at the grocery store. Or maybe they simply sat in comfortable silence, eating together after another long day. We'll never know, but we do know one thing. This wasn't a one-time event. It became a routine, and routines are built through repetition. When 2 people repeat the same quiet moments over and over again, something invisible begins to grow between them, something no competition, results, or score sheets can ever measure. Then in 2021, another important change happened. Riku moved into a different apartment in the very same building where Ryuichi was living. That small move quietly transformed their daily lives. Back when Riku was staying with her host family, preparing matching lunches required planning ahead. But once they lived in the same building, everything became easier. After practice, they could simply head back home together, prepare lunch in the same kitchen, and leave for the massage clinic. Or perhaps Ryuichi cooked first, and Riku picked up her lunch before they left. Either way, sharing meals became even more natural than before. Their days settled into a rhythm. They traveled to the rink together. They trained side by side for hours. After practice, they went to the massage clinic together. Then they sat down and shared matching homemade lunches. Interestingly, it was after this routine became fully established that their results began to skyrocket. Beginning in the 2021-22 season, they captured the World Championship, the Four Continents Championship, and the Grand Prix final, completing one of the greatest seasons in pair skating. Is that simply a coincidence? Sports nutritionist Akiko Nishiyama once said something that offers an interesting perspective. She explained that knowledge alone isn't enough. The real difference comes from the ability to continue, to stay consistent. That consistency wasn't limited to skating technique. It included healthy eating, recovery, daily discipline, and perhaps the discipline of always showing up for each other. Most people hear the phrase matching lunch boxes and immediately think it's sweet or adorable, and it certainly is, but viewed through the eyes of elite athletes, the story carries a much deeper meaning. Ryuichi wasn't going to massage appointments because he wanted to relax. He went because his body was hurting. Years of competition had taken their toll, and without regular treatment, training the next day became increasingly difficult. Yet during those painful days, Riku stayed by his side. She waited. She shared a meal with him. She made sure he wasn't alone. That choice carries a weight that goes far beyond being cute. Later, Ryuichi said something that now feels even more meaningful. I couldn't have come this far without Riku. Whenever I hear those words, I think about those quiet evenings after massage appointments. The gold medals were won on the ice, but the journey that made those victories possible was built far away from the spotlight, in waiting rooms, in small kitchens, in parked cars, and over simple homemade lunches shared at the end of another exhausting day. Sometimes, greatness isn't created by spectacular moments. Sometimes, it's built one quiet evening at a time.